Here we go. 6 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. So raise your hand and tell me one thing you heard different. Yes, in the front row.
Phrasing, dynamics, style.
Okay, that's more than one thing. You know, for a bunch of musicians, that's one thing we can learn. You got to really listen carefully. Yeah, but that's I'd like to know, yeah, so dynamics, that's a big one? Yes, in the back. A heightened sense of groove. Okay, I like that. Is that kind of what you meant by phrasing?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be using this thing, right?
Is that what you meant by phrasing?
Yeah, so a heightened sense of groove. I like that. Anything else? Yes, you in the second row. Vibrato, right. Yes, in the back. Balance within the section. Okay, beautiful. Any one more? Yes. Better intonation, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, these things are really, really important. And I always like to bring them to people's attention because most of the time, you know, when we hear younger people playing, and probably our young guys can maybe speak to that, having come into this section, it's so important. The swing is obviously super important. But the articulation and the expression, if you really listen to this band and you listen to the sections with Earl Warren and Marshall Royal, it's unbelievable how much stuff is going on there. It's like it's like listening to a concert violinist or an opera singer, something like this. So we really need to use all the tools that we have to express. Music is the expression of emotion. Communication of emotion through the organization of sound in time and space. And that can be done in so many different ways, right? But the way these guys did it is very specific. And so that's really important. Okay. Yeah, great. So now, do I have an alto player as his horn out? Do I have a tenor player? Come on, tenor players. Do you have a baritone player?
A baritone player.
Nobody? Okay. Well, yeah, come on up. Come on up, man. Put your video down. Yeah. So what's your name?
Jesus Romero.
All right, Jesus. What do you play? You play currently in the big band?
Yeah, Dallas Jazz Orchestra.
Okay, cool. What chair do you play?
Second album.
Okay, perfect. So we're gonna let Marcus stand behind you here, and let you sit in here. Now we're not gonna play this tune because you might have perfect pitch and now you know all the parts. That happens. So we're gonna play something that's a little bit simpler. So we're gonna take this tune called Local Swing. It's okay, yeah, you can touch the music. It's good. You touch the music, man. You have no idea how many musicians touch that music, man. Yeah, man. You're connected now. I'm serious. Okay, letter L. That's the joke. Go to L. Yeah. Oh, now. Okay. So here we go. played this part before. I don't even know if I'm doing a good thing here because I never get my gig back, you know. Have some fun. All right, man. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Without me. Just you. So now you got the top part. You want him to play the lead? Yeah, no, I want you to play this part. All right. 1, just without me. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, everybody. Pull you off sides. Ball start. What do you want me to do? Ready, Doug? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. What's that experience like? What did you notice? Is that like the way it normally is when you play second alto in your band?
No, I definitely had to listen a lot the first time I was just kind of reading the chart. You guys are doing a lot of things that are not on the music, so I had to adapt it and just,
Right. You notice how we have no markings?
Yeah, no markings. So you just have to really, really listen a lot.
Yeah. So that's a really really great observation actually, because there's so much. If you were to see the music, a lot of times you see music now and people write every little band that they want, and actually music is, I hate it too, because it takes all the artistry away from the artists. So in reality, the music is written with, sometimes there's dynamics and things like that, of course, but as far as the phrasing things go like that, a lot of that stuff is just up to interpretation. So, yeah, that's really important. So thanks, Jesus, man, that was great. Anybody else get up the courage? Come on. You get out the video the last time. They were really nice people. Now, I saw all of these people with their hands up. You really didn't bring your instruments? Okay. Well, I don't know about that. I got plenty of instruments over just around the corner. We could have planned it that way, but okay. Well, yeah. Let me just briefly. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do April. April in Paris. Famous, right? So we're going to play this as it's written, okay? And then we're going to play it like we play it. just here on the all the way on the side.
You guys really laid back that triplet the second time.
Yes, we were laying back. Definitely. And did anybody happen to notice what my foot was doing? Was my foot laying back? The thing about laying back is it's not slowing down. So you have to really, in order to lay back effectively, you really have to have that internal pulse inside of your body. I feel like I'm talking too much, so maybe I should have some of my colleagues talk a little bit about that. Okay, so, but I do want to talk a little bit about tempo, because what I oftentimes see when I go around and work with younger bands is that, that's what they go, well, how do you get that laid back thing? And, I think sometimes we make a little bit too much about that. If you listen to the band, like from the 30s all the way through the 40s, through the 50s and the 60s, those two bands, sort of the glory years, the bands that made this institution one of the greatest bands in the history of the planet. Most of the time, they're not laying back. The beat is very wide. When we really get into time, the beat is wide, and there's different places within that beat that you can lay your notes, right? And it's a very complicated situation, because sometimes the drummer might be on top, the bass player might. So it's a whole thing, and you really need to find the middle in order to know which way you want to go. It's a very subtle thing. So it's relaxed, and sometimes we're a little bit, the Basie band definitely has got its own unique feel. There's no doubt about it. It's hard to put it into words. But that's what I would get you to focus on, is really learn how to play in time. Learn how to play in time. All together. And then from there, you can start to explore the subtleties of phrasing. But that's a lot of times what and then when you lay back, if you lose the groove, then the layback is really, now you messed the whole thing up. You know what I mean? Oh, good.
So I wasn't trying to brag earlier when I said that I worked with Earl Warren and Marshall Royal. These are the two alto players that really defined the way the section played. And when I worked with Earl Warren, it was in Buck Clayton's band. And Buck Clayton was in the Old Testament band, the first band, right? Earl Warren, right? That's what they called it, the Old Testament and the New Testament band was Marshall. Two different alto styles. Earl, back then, the Basie band, a lot of those tunes, even though we just played Moten Swing, we did a version of Moten Swing that is more like the New Testament band. That's what was arranged by Ernie Wilkins. But the one thing that both Earl and Marshall had in common was you could always hear them. Doesn't mean they were playing loud. It means their tone was centered, and it was a beautiful tone. It wasn't a harsh, bright tone. As you hear David here, he has a beautiful tone on the saxophone. But we can always hear him, always, and it doesn't mean playing loud. And it's easy for me and the rest of the fellas too to follow a true lead alto player. The way Earl Warren was and the way Marshall was. Marshall, surprisingly to me, I was working with him with Frank West's band, and Frank had told me, he says, you're going to be very surprised when you work with Marshall, because he doesn't play that loud. And sure enough, he wasn't loud. But I could hear every note, every nuance. And that's what, as an inside player, playing the inside parts, you never, ever want to be playing so loud that you can't hear what the lead alto player is doing. And I'll add one other thing. When I first got on this band, my sound was puny compared to everybody else. That's the great thing about the Basie band. I had just come from Benny Goodman's band, where we almost had to suck on the horn instead of blow on it. Because it wasn't loud, it was great. I mean, Benny would pace in front of you. He was notorious for having a saxophone section do solos, and then he paced in front of you and give you dirty looks. But when I got on this band, I remember the first rehearsal, man, I said, I gotta do something. I couldn't keep up when it was time to roar, you know. And that's really what's so great about this band, is this sax section can whisper and then roar, the whole band. And so that's just what I wanted to add to that, you know. It's important for the players that aren't playing lead to really listen to the lead player, and it's important for the lead player to really have his act together, or her act together, his or her act together.
Yeah, hold on. Give an example. Sure, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's just give a quick example, because we have been playing kind of strong. We take a section from Lone Swing, and we'll show you what Doug is talking about. So we just go from fourth bar of letter B. Good. Let's do that again. Let's kind of sloppy.
We got the leader over
Yeah, we got a band leader over here, so we're nervous. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Better. Okay, so you see, we can play really soft. Let's play twice as soft. Exactly. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And we definitely play that soft with the whole band. Definitely. Okay, now let's play a Fortissimo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So that's the dynamic range. So if you play saxophone and you can't play in that full dynamic range, then you are severely limiting the tools that you have for expression and the music that you can make. So this has to do with practicing. This has nothing to do with practicing in the band. You got to practice this. You got to do this practice in the instrument. Okay, Doug Miller,
Oh,
talk to us.
okay. This has, going back to April.
Yeah.
I apologize for jumping around a little bit, but, there was something I thought that might be valuable to for you all to sort of observe with the previous song we just did, with this April in Paris. Down letter B.
Yeah.
I'd just like to sort of show you how the phrasing and I guess the style and interpretation of certain parts of the music has evolved, you know. So if we play letter B just as it's written, yeah, you know, especially down here. Like the ninth major.
Yeah.
Can you do that whole section B?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the way it's written.
Count it off, man.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Cool. Sorry about that. I forgot to play it straight. Hard.
Okay, so we'll do it the way we do it now. This is the way we perform it now. Same thing, but
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Doug was talking about is written in that, where we say, dee 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 da da, it began to lay further back, like it evolved like that over the course of the years in the band to the point where we couldn't make the next phrase unless we left one of the notes out. So both Doug and I joined the band. First time we saw that, we definitely not with the section, because they were playing like quarter notes instead of, quarter notes. So there's 6 notes in the bar, so that's not gonna fit. So we had to leave a couple of them out in order to get the next phrase. So that's the way it goes, it just evolves like that. So I think before we, to sum things up, I'd like you guys to think about some questions you might have for us, and just before that, I'd like maybe to have Marcus and Josh talk a little bit about how you prepared for a gig like this, and what your experience was, when you came in the band as a young player. And maybe also, Josh, you can talk a little bit about the importance of the baritone saxophone, because that's the most important. I hate to say it, but after the lead alto, the baritone and the lead alto are like one. He can't be loud enough. We're still working on that.
All right. So, it's kind of my start into the band. Well, first, I'm originally from South Florida, a city called Deerfield Beach, near Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And then I eventually did my studies at Michigan State University, undergrad and master's. And throughout that time, starting really late middle school into high school, is when I really fell in love with jazz, and Count Basie Orchestra was like the band that was like, it was always Basie and Ellington and that. And my high school band director would always preach the importance of swing. And that stuck with me throughout my time there, and even going into Michigan State. And so coming into this band, I knew I got called to sub. God had called me to sub, and I was okay. I'm coming in to do this thing. I got to give it my all. I know this is like a dream band. It's. And the first thing I did when I sat down, or the first thing that Dave said to me, was like, man, just listen. And that always stuck with me. And to this day, every night, it could be something different that Dave does to phrase. But I'm always trying to keep an ear on Dave as the lead alto. I'm also trying to keep an ear on Frank Green as the lead trumpet player, and I'm also trying to feel the groove at the time of the ride cymbal with Robert on the drums. But everything I'm doing, I'm trying to, as a second alto player, I'm trying to stay in Dave's back pocket. I'm not trying to overpower him, but I'm trying to elevate his playing as much as I can to help him sound as best as he can. And that's my role as second alto. Right? It's a supporting role, but it's very important that Dave is only going to sound as good as I sound as well. So I got to help him to bring up his sound. And I think it's really important when you're studying at high school or even college, really pay attention to the details of the music. And when I'm teaching students, that's one of the main things that separates the amateurs from the professionals. It's the attention to detail, dynamics, articulation, really snatching some of the notes, things like that, and really over-exaggerating those. Because right here we're playing, but we're trying to play for the person in the back of the room, so we want you all to feel our emotion, right? So throughout my time so far, I think that's two of the main things, is really detail and just listening to the section, listening to your lead out player, listening to Dave as much as possible. But over time that I've been here these past 2 years, I've gotten a chance to hear a lot of the tunes that we play and hear them over and over, and I kind of learn some of Dave's tendencies. I can kind of anticipate, but then sometimes it may be different, So you just got to kind of be aware of those moments, and then you kind of find your way along the way, just like the man did a little bit ago. So, yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Mark. That's so true. There is a real art. Every chair is really important. There is a real art to playing third alto, as we used to say in the old days, and in fourth tenor, because the support that he gives me is really, really important. And I am kind of a little atypical in the sense that I don't do things always exactly the same. I'm kind of in the moment with what's happening around me. Every night on the bandstand is slightly different. And if you connect to the music and certain things happen and you feel laid back in one place at one day and another place at another day, sometimes you need to be a little bit further on the front side of that beat I talked about. So there definitely are changes. And if you're listening really closely, it's almost a telepathic thing that develops. Thank you, Marcus. So Josh, yeah, talk to us, man.
Cool. So as I mentioned before, I joined in 2018, and I have to say I was 100% not prepared to just for the gravity of the history. I mean, I honestly didn't really know what I was getting into. Fortunately, I was blessed enough to go to a high school and a college that appreciated that in Ellington and Basie. So as music educators, I think it's really important for you to expose your kids to this music, as well as listening to it, and make sure they actually hear the recordings, and try to take them out to hear the players play this live as much as possible. Being in Philly, we're in close proximity to New York, and of course Philly, there's a lot of live music. So I was fortunate with that, but what I learned, I don't know if I really talked like the first day I was in the band, so the first thing I learned is just shut up and listen. I remember we were in, my first experience was in, I guess, symphony space in Chicago. We had a rehearsal right from the hotel, right after the plane. Just kind of sat there and listened. And yeah, it was amazing. But another thing I learned, are there any baritone saxophone players in here? Oh, where's your horn? But anyway, so one of the first things I learned about the baritone is, I forgot when you said it, Leo, but you said you would look down at Johnny Williams, and if you could hear him, it's cool, but if you couldn't, you would look down at him and say, I can't hear you. So, of course, we're supposed to reach out as a baritone player to the back and have a huge sound, but I'm really playing the deal over there to have a sound that spreads across the section. That's maybe a little conceptual, maybe nebulous, but that's something to keep in mind. Also, as a baritone player, I learned that we're actually playing lead baritone. And so my job is to basically catalog every single note, every single way Dave plays every single note, and know how he does it. And he does it something different, I ask him about it if he wants to keep doing it. So I'm not guessing what I'm not reacting to what he's doing. I'm basically playing what he's playing. So I like to think of it, I'm just an octave extension of the lead alto. Because a lot of this is in unison. April Paris is in unison. Molten Swing, the melody is in unison. That's another great part. So it's really learning and listening to how they're playing it, and it's different for every band. I mean, I get a chance to play with a band or a jazz orchestra. Nicholas plays totally different, but it's still the same concept. Lead alto sitting on top, and you just gotta follow. And yeah, this is something very specific to this band, and there's a lot of energy. And another thing that I learned is this music's pretty theatrical. You have to put a lot of energy and emotion into it. And I found myself out there playing some solis, like in Hoopy. Like, man, I'm about to pass out. Just putting so much air through the horn. But what I learned is that's what the music requires. And as high school students or younger kids, it might seem a little awkward to play with that much intensity and kind of put yourself into it. You're kind of wonderful. Leave yourself out there. But it's what the music requires, so that's what you have to do. If you watch Dave play, he's not just playing the notes, he's directing with his body, and that's kind of what I'm cues that I'm getting to. And yeah, that's something that is required. And also this sound is huge. Just listen to Harry Carden, listen to Charlie Bowers, just listen. So.
Thank you, Josh. And I would say the way Marcus said he's listening to me, who am I listening to like that? The baritone. Okay? Because if Josh and I are like one, the rest of it's easy.
I just want to say something about what Josh was talking about with me and Johnny Williams. See, I would always mess around trying to find new mouthpieces or something. And Johnny, I looked at Johnny, and he'd do this. Or this, But the most important thing I learned is that if Johnny didn't hear me, first of all, I could always hear Johnny, okay? But it wasn't always that way in Johnny's career. Johnny's first night on the Basie band, I believe, was at Roseland Ballroom. He was replacing Charlie Fowkes. And Lockjaw had gotten him on the gig, but Lockjaw wasn't playing. They stood right in front of Fowkes the entire night. Eddie Lockjaw Davis, Charlie Fowkes stood right in front of Johnny Williams. They took him on the break to the bar and said, the first thing you gotta do is go buy a new mouthpiece at Manny's tomorrow. And we're talking about Johnny Williams, who was a famous baritone sax player who were on types of all great records with Ike and Tina Turner, Ray Charles. Ray was a very dear friend of Ray Charles. Ray Charles's band, Marvin Gaye. So really one of the great sounds of the baritone. But when he got on this band, something different. So I remember Josh. I never really said anything to Josh, And then we were at the Blue Note in Tokyo. And I think I said, Josh, I don't know how it came about, but I kind of politely said, man, you should check out a Berg. And so I thought, well, okay, when he gets back to New York, he'll go check out a Berg. The next night, he comes in with a Berg. He'd gone out that day. The next morning, hunting around Tokyo to find a mouthpiece. So that tells you what kind of dedication this young man has. And immediately, I heard him warming up, and I walked right over and said, you went and got a Berg, and he happened to get a good one. They're not all good. But, and I could tell by the end of the night, he was exhausted. Right? You started off good, man, buddy. It's time for some CPR almost. But it's very important, to be able to fit into the section. And Josh is doing a great job, and so is this young man next to me, Marcus. Immediately, I could hear immediately within one tune I know if this is going to be a great second alto player. And Marcus was that way. So, welcome, gentlemen. And can I borrow some money?
So we have about 10 minutes left. I just want to touch on what one thing that you remind me of, Josh, is that how important it is to play this music with passion. Okay? You have to love the music, all music. You got to play it from the bottom of your heart with feeling, with love, with passion. And that's what all this stuff we're doing, that's where it's coming from. So just never forget that. And anytime you take out your instrument, anytime practicing your scales, whatever it is, play it like you love it and you mean it and you want it. And we play for others. We don't play for ourselves. We're in the service industry. We play for you. Okay, we have about 5 or 10 minutes. 10 minutes. So I'd like to open it up for questions. Yes, for any of us.
So I want for you guys to talk about how you what kind of feelings you're tongue in and the chamber in your mouth. There's so many things that are coming out that are, I think, there. I'd love to hear what you're trying to say.
It's a good question. Anybody want to take that one? You want to talk about sort of tonguing and the positions of the tongue in what we call the oral cavity.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, as a teacher, I teach, I just try to explain the science very simply. It's really all about breath, the breath support, and supporting the air with the diaphragm, and it comes up the air canal, and it's going up, right? Which way is it going when it goes into the mouthpiece? It's going this way. So, as you say, in that oral cavity, that air has to be redirected. Besides which, if we think about the diameter of the air tube, I don't know what it is, I've been meaning to look this up, but it's much smaller than the oral cavity, right? So if you have an airstream that's of a certain speed and it comes into a larger space like this room, what happens to the airspeed? It diminishes, right? So then we have to shape the air and directed into the right place. And this is a really important thing that any saxophone player has to learn how to do. I'm always hesitant to tell people what to do because I think everybody's physiology is a little bit different, but I do think that it's really important to understand the physiology of what's happening when we blow and to use your ear. Your ear will tell you if you're doing something that's, right or not. I mean, I'm a person who tongues with the tip of the tongue on the tip of the reed. There are different people that do different things, but one simple thing you can do is like if you don't actually do this with anybody around, especially now, but the idea of like if you were spitting out a piece of rice, this is a really good match for COVID. It does help. It does help some. So, anyways, because that's a really narrow airstream, and trumpet players we talk about that kind of thing all the time. I'm a big believer that saxophone is really no different than, well, it's some different, but the way you approach the breath is similar to a brass instrument. It's easy to play saxophone without doing that, but you can't get the kind of sound we're getting without doing that. You can play saxophone without supporting the sound. You can play saxophone without directing the air correctly, but you'll only go so far with that. So, one exercise, I like to work with my students with the mouthpiece only, because if you practice with the mouthpiece, and generally speaking, I'm not going to use the mic for this. So the mouthpiece, you can get like an octave. You should be able to get about an octave on the mouthpiece. So if I would normally play about here, okay, I can go. Okay, so if you can do an octave on your mouthpiece like that, you can play songs. So, why do I do that? I don't know. But the advantage to doing that is that you need to learn, you can really hear how well you're controlling the sound. Right? So, obviously, if I were to do what I just did on the mouthpiece on the saxophone, I wouldn't get a change of pitch of an octave. I'd get a change of a pitch of much less. But when you hear us manipulating pitch like we are, that's what we're doing. And so if you really want to play the saxophone in tune, you need to be able to do that, because no matter how many fancy saxophones they have over in that other room, I guarantee you, they don't play in tune. You have to play them in tune. Some of them they have different scales, and you might make different adjustments, and you can play different ways on different instruments. But in general, you need to learn how to do this. So that's something really important to kind of practice, and then you can practice dynamics. Try that. You'll find out a lot about yourself if you try to take I generally like to have my students play with the pitch that's in the middle. So an alto mouthpiece, the octave is usually from a C to a C or a D flat to a D flat. Depends on the mouthpiece and the chambers and stuff like that. Tenor, it's usually it's more like take a B flat to a B flat. So I like to, most of the time I'm about in the middle. I'm usually at an F sharp or a G on a piano concert. And from there I can go up and I can go down without the tone quality disintegrating or getting pinched sounding. So that's my spiel on the oral cavity. Yes, behind you, yes, the mask.
Hi, I was wondering if you guys had a mouthpiece.
Okay. Well, I play on a mouthpiece that was actually given to me by Johnny Williams. That was a spare mouthpiece of Bobby Plater, who was the lead alto player who took over after Marshall left the band. So it's a New York Meyer 6 with a small chamber.
I actually used to play Meyer, but now I'm playing on a Morgan Excalibur. I guess it's a size 5.
I'm playing on a old 1950s Autolink No USA number 10 with 3.5 reed Diodario, and this is a tenor bend, this horn, as you can see. The best horns ever made.
playing Diadario as well. 3 medium, unfiled. Honestly, I don't really think the file or unfiled really matters, but I normally do unfiled and I can file it myself if I want to. And this is a Mark 6 in 1969-70.
Yes, and I play on, right now I'm playing on some old brown box Rico number 5 reed. I generally play stiff reeds and other brands. I've played maybe like the Dario Reserve, played on a 4 there on those are a different cut. So Randoran usually like a V12 or a blue box like 4, so that's usually what I found. And this horn is a 1927 Con, gold-plated Con, but it ain't the horn.
Yeah, I found a mouthpiece that was made by a Los Angeles mouthpiece maker, Charles K. And we were performing at the Hollywood Bowl several years ago. He brought all these mouthpieces with him backstage. And let us try some. And this one that he had fit me like a hand in the glove. So it's like a number 6, Charles Bay. I use Rico reeds, normally maybe 3.5 Rico, or I'll use Lavaz number 3s. And my horn is a P. Marriott, because the second edition, the P. Marriott tenor. And I particularly enjoy this horn. It's really, really comfortable. But to be honest with you, at home I have my Mark 6 silver, from 1956. It's like, the first models that they started making after the balance action. And that is the horn that I really love, and it's got this pedigree to it. And I don't bring it out, unfortunately. I get a lot of criticism about that. They say the horn is made to be played. But it's,
It sounds good.
That was Junior Cook's horn.
yes, it was. Yeah, it had a pedigree to it, so I'm very protective of it. A little bit more than I should be. But anyway, I'm using my P. Marriott, which is the next best thing to me.
So I want to preface by saying I'm not very much of a gearhead. It just kind of works, so play. But I have a silver Mark 6. I think it's 1963. And my mouthpiece. I told the story, but yeah, I got it in Japan. It's actually a pretty new bird. I think it's 115/1. I had a Duke off before this, and I played with the band. I remember where we were. We were in Canberra, how do you say it? I was backstage, and Dave was like, "Yeah, that mouthpiece is cutting it. You gotta figure something else out." So luckily, that was the same trip. So I was desperate to get a new mouthpiece, but yeah, it works. I have Dario 3.5 blue box reeds. It works. So, but I'm also looking to get a con, because that's the sound.
We have a con waiting for him to see how. We have a 1930s con waiting.
Yeah, so the horns are an interesting thing. I mean, I think I've never been a gearhead either. I have a few minor mouthpieces. I've been playing essentially on the same mouthpiece until Johnny gave me that one because mine got damaged. I did several horns. And I'll just say about the cons, it does, like for this music, like Marshall Roy played on the cons, so one thing about the cons, at least on the altos, is the ability to manipulate pitch and the ability to, the full range of dynamics. It gives me a little bit more, a little bit trickier to control because of that, but it gives me more possibilities. So, but when I came back in the band, I was playing on Mark 6 anyway, so it all works. Couple more questions?
Well, actually, this is about when we have to close the formal portion. Although if they're gracious enough, they may be willing to take some individual questions up front. But gentlemen, we need to thank these 5 folks for helping us out. Meantime, we'll see you down the hall in our jazz ballroom at 1:30 p.m. just down the hall. The Las Vegas Academy of the Arts Jazz Band, directed by Patrick Bowman, with guests Peter Levati, Jason Hainsworth, Bijan Watson, and Jeff Hamilton. It's 1:30 just down the hall.